good afternoon and welcome to the Cloud Design Box podcast. Here with me today is Stefan Hagen, who's the Director of Digital Learning at Lingfield College. Hi, Stefan, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I hope you're well.
Yeah, well, thank you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what role you have at Lingfield, and how you're involved in the plans for per student devices?
Sure. So I'm a teacher in the sixth form predominantly, but I'm also part of a team that within the school in the teaching elements try and drive digital elements within the school. We have got an IT team who are a separate company that work with us, as well as various other partners that we use to help us get through all of these things, including yourselves. But from my point of view, I'm the Director of Digital Learning on the teaching and learning side, which means that ultimately I try and show teachers within the school how they can operate in a way that improves students' skills as well as improving their own and prepare students for the 21st century. But I have got some key colleagues, a few of them, particularly Ben, who is a computer science teacher, who's often the brains behind the whole operation, and I end up doing the presenting and get a lot of the credit. But Ben Monk is fantastic because he knows a lot more on the technical side, as well as also knowing it from a teaching point of view as well.
Brilliant. Yes, let's hear it for Ben today then as well. Well done, man. So before we get into the main chat about the per student devices, how did you get in a position that you're able to start thinking about using per student devices and for that to be a worthwhile thing?
Sure. Well, I took over from a fantastic colleague within my role, and the role was expanded a couple of years before COVID. And although that teacher had done a lot in terms of putting the foundations in place to try and get digital moving, but honest truth is that we wouldn't say that we were at the forefront of it by any stretch of the imagination. And then lockdown came. Yeah. So we'd already started looking at things like cloud-based, etc., from a security point of view, but we weren't really moving very fast on it. And then lockdown came, and then we basically had to very quickly, especially as an independent school, start delivering all of our lessons through Teams and think about how do we work remotely, which made us start to think about all of these next steps and so on. In an ideal world, before lockdown, we would have already migrated all of our staff files to the cloud and had lots of teachers having their own proper staff devices, students, etc. But we didn't. So then it was very difficult to get any devices during their first lockdowns. Yeah. But what we really wanted to do was try and build on the momentum of this big leap that we had from TechWise during lockdown. And I really would have loved it if we came back and all the students brought their devices into school straight away and we started rolling with it that way. But for lots of reasons, that's difficult. Our IT team were very scared about doing things that way, even though our sixth formers bring their own devices in. But as a whole school strategy, that was tough. And also, talking to the likes of you guys, we realised that we needed to do things carefully and properly. So migrating even staff files into the cloud is not something that needs to be rushed. But we went through that process with you guys when we got back from lockdown. And Ben particularly made sure that we did it really carefully. And I think one of your colleagues said that when you move house, in an ideal world, you clean up your house before you move and you don't take all the junk and stuff.
That's right.
So we tried to do it that way rather than just crash everything from the old server across to the cloud and then try and tidy it up. So from that point of view, we gave staff training, we gave staff time, but with some deadlines. And then ultimately we turned the old servers to view only, which we thought was a compromise. So that if they hadn't still moved things across they wanted to go back and look at, they could still access it, but they couldn't create a dual system, which would create confusion. So that's one thing that we thought was a good idea. I think that came from you guys as well as an idea. And that means that now we've managed to get staff all in the cloud, and now we've got staff to all have a good device each. We've got docks in the classroom that have just gone in so that staff can go into any classroom, plug a dock in, which will charge their device and they can deliver from that device, which starts to open up teaching and learning things I'll talk about later on. But that's great. And that kind of made us start to think about, once staff are set up and more confident as they start to use these devices, then we can start thinking about students. And we thought that way would make sense also, because although we have got tech people around, and an English teacher isn't necessarily a tech teacher, if there is any problem with the device or saving things in the cloud in the classroom, then they're much more likely to be able to help the student if they've already been using a similar device and been on it first. So we wanted to do this quicker. Things always take a little bit longer than you'd hope, especially with the supply of tech that's available. But we are now in a position where we can start to at least plan for the next few years. And again, I would have liked it to be straight away really quick, but these things, for lots of good reasons, take a long time. Plus, I think everyone had enough of computers when we first got back from lockdown.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when I was trying to tell people, look, guys, let's keep using Teams from a chat point of view between staff and cut down on emails, it didn't really go very far. Everyone had enough of a computer screen for a while, but that's
right. I guess, psychologically, people associated Teams perhaps with lockdown, pandemic, really, being stuck in your own little room and on the kitchen table or whatever, and not being able to talk to other people and not being able to have a physical presence, which is different from choosing to do it. When you're told you can't do it, or you can't go and see your friends. But I think hopefully what's happening now is people are starting to realize those live meetings that like we're having now, they're just one part of Teams, but there's a lot more to it. There's files in there. There are other apps you can connect in. There's quizzes, there's assignments, there's class notebook. And as teachers discover those, I think maybe what they're starting to realize is that those tools will help them in the classroom. It's interesting because the term blended learning. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, blended learning, and it's now come to mean some learning in the classroom normally, and the rest of it is kind of remote learning at home. Whereas if you go back sort of 5 years, blended learning meant something different. It meant being in the classroom and sometimes using a device in the classroom. So I think it's really interesting.
Watching something digitally related before going in the classroom, rather than actually while they're in the classroom using it, kind of
flipped learning kind of thing. That you got to watch this video before you come in, and exactly. But it's all good. So whatever you call it, whether it's remote learning, blended learning, e-learning, whatever, it works. But I am hoping to start to see these tools, especially things like Teams and Class Notebook, getting used in the classroom. But of course, for that to happen, you got to have devices. So that brings us on nicely to the main bulk of the question. It is what are your plans for per student devices? How are you going to make it happen? And then we'll look at some of the educational benefits of doing that.
So it took a while to come up with a plan, spoke to different people, led to some extent by IT and the realities of IT. I'm more a competent user, so I'm like, why can't we just do this? It works for me as an individual on my home Wi-Fi, and obviously it's more complicated than that when you've got whole networks and safeguarding concerns. So our plan at the moment is moving forward a few steps, and those steps also factor in that we're a day school, not a boarding school. We visited various independent schools who were great at opening their doors to us and telling us what they're doing. And we kind of use that and then change it, bearing in mind our budgets and the nature of our school. So all staff now have a device and we're in the cloud. So from a student point of view, we're going to start with year 10 and up. The sixth formers already kind of bring their own device in. For now, we will allow it to be bring your own device in. It's a little bit less concerning when it's the sixth formers rather than younger students from a management and security point of view, and seeing everything that they're up to, even though we have got some access through the network in terms of Wi-Fi. So we'll continue that with the sixth form. But the idea is either in a year's time or 2 years' time, depending on how quickly we can move with certain school kind of procedures and governors approving things, we are going to get year 10s purchasing a laptop through the school, which we'll give them a few options. So there'll be a few different price points, but ultimately it will all be Windows based so that we can run all smoothly on a network. and they will also be stylus enabled touch devices, so that you get the real benefits of actually having a device, but also, you know, being able to do artistic things, use a pen to be a creative thinker, use OneNote properly. Whilst I quite like Apple devices, but
yeah,
they're actual laptops. I like proper laptops, not tablets. Don't fold all the way backwards and have that touchscreen ability. So we want 3 different options from that point of view. The reason they're being purchased through the school is so that we can set them up using,
yep.
is it Azure? I think it is the way that we can upload and kind of set the devices up consistently, quite quickly, and in a way that they've all got the relevant software that they need, but all the relevant permissions, and we can see everything. And it will be a work device. We are looking into, can we have students be able to create a different login so that they could do personal things, gaming, etc., on the weekends, but that wouldn't be able to be signed into on site. We don't think that's possible, though. So the general gist is that we also need to give parents notice and make it clear that they're going to be buying this device, and maybe they don't want to go for the top end one, because they might also need another device for the students in terms of gaming, etc.
Yeah. So they might need their gaming tower so they can play their games. But also they have a relatively cheap device. I mean, they won't be cheap because cheap doesn't work, but relatively cheap, well priced, good resources, something where the battery lasts a little while.
Yes.
Decent resolution.
Battery you mentioned. So some of the steps that we're talking about are about giving parents notice about spending money, etc. So we've already for a few years been telling them that we're Windows school, and these are the devices that we recommend, but you can get any Windows device. So some of those parents who may have bought those devices more recently may well be able to bring that in rather than purchase a new one.
Yeah.
But it would be kind of wiped and again set up through Azure or whatever the system is there that our IT guys use. Yeah. So that would save a bit of money, but have the consistency. So there's an element there. But also infrastructure has really been one of the things that's delayed things and still is our biggest headache. It's very difficult for us to, for instance, put plug ports in around all of the classrooms, given the type of flooring that we have. So that's a massive project that might actually mean that instead of doing things that way, we basically have got lockers that we have to fit in around the school that are charging lockers, where there are different price point ones, but we've kind of found a Dutch company that we've got quite a simple one that will work on many different devices, and you can change things so that moving forward it should be future proof. But you know, we didn't need all the smart features that some of the companies offer out there about knowing who's got it plugged in, etc. So that we'll write a policy that they have to come in, it needs to be charged when they come in, but there is an option for them to have a locker and to charge it at lunchtimes, etc. as well as from a security point of view, insurance point of view, they have got a locker somewhere secure and safe to put it, rather than chuck it in their bag and throw that around when they're playing games. You know,
bags do get thrown around a lot, don't they? That's the problem. I lost a calculator that way when I was young, and I still regret it now. Actually, I had to buy another one, and they're expensive back then. Calculators, Texas Instruments, really about 30 quid, I think it cost to replace that. Well, so do look after your bag. Yeah, now it's a laptop. So I could have done with that locker. You know, it's American style, isn't it? You go get your locker and you put stuff in. But why not? Because we won't need many books anymore, because all the content will be on or in the cloud and on the devices. So pretty much that laptop, a pen and a pencil and maybe a ruler is probably all you need.
Well, and you say a pen and a pencil and a ruler. If they use the stylus for a lot of that, then you know there are certain, you could go over the top if you wanted to. If you're a student that really wanted to do sometimes digital for the sake of it, just also that it's all in one place without having to take photos. It is possible. But one of the reasons we're starting with GCSE is to make it manageable, but also because we do value that there, you know, is an age whereby it might be appropriate for them to still be developing their pen and paper skills. And we thought that it serves both purposes from a planning point of view, but a educational year 10 up to that GCSE program might be where they want to develop those digital skills a bit more, and they've already developed core foundations elsewhere.
And that as they're moving up and that they move on, you know, to kind of the sixth form and beyond, they're very close to the world of work there. And I can tell you the world of work looks very much like that. It's computers, it's screens, it's pens. I do have a pen on my desk, but I very rarely use it. It's only if I have to do some paperwork thing and somebody's forcing me to print a form out, fill the form in, and scan it back in and email it, or even send it in the mail. But it's very rare that I touch a pen. So that is definitely the future.
Well, we had a lot of fun getting students to use their phones to upload pictures using OneDrive app that are PDF files with multiple pages in one file and things like that over lockdown. So, but then you don't even need scanners and printers if you are doing that. Legal documents now are starting to be able to be sent that way. So we are really keen that we do develop the digital skills for the future, the 21st century jobs that we don't know what they will be. So it's not that we're trying to tie them into learning just how to use Windows and Windows Office programs. It's that they're going to have some transferable skills for whatever the future may bring, and that's part of it as well. And also part of it, I think, is that I always try and tell teachers that as well as the teaching and learning things that we can go into, it's a time saver for teachers. Once you put the effort in to build up electronic, digital related resources, it might take a bit the first time round and sitting down and working through, but then you can reuse it, self-mark, etc. So much easier over the years. So
and especially if you share, right? So if you've got multiple teachers in the department and they get organized, or the head of department organizes them, said, right, we got these 3 new modules that are coming in now. If you write this one and you write this one and you write this one, each of you is only doing a third of the work.
Well, even shared documents for that, collaborating and saying, you do this, you plan page 1 and 2 of that template and that department plan, and it's just so much more efficient. And that really is another thing that has driven it, is productivity. I mean, I know lots of schools have done this years ago, but if you're a staff member that's moving around classroom to classroom and you need to log into a desktop each time, and it can take a while, even with a decent processor, to log into a kind of static server, then you're losing at least 5 minutes to the lesson, not to mention how you manage that with the kids and behaviour point of view can sometimes be a challenge. And over a period of time, that is fees that parents are paying for lessons. That's a lot. And not to mention, and from a business point of view, productivity. You mentioned Teams calls and videos calls. I think it's so much more efficient having Doddle or a Teams chat and saying, when's everyone available? Or quickly seeing when someone's green and then calling them. And then going, we just need Dave to give us one bit of this. It says he's green. Let's invite him into the meeting just for 1 minute, rather than try and get all your diaries together and then be at a meeting that you don't need to be for the whole hour.
It's awful. And I remember back in the day, being on conference calls, and I used to drive around back then. So you'd be listening on the phone. You'd be like 3 hours of project management in a conference call, and you think, it's a good job I'm driving home, because otherwise, if I was actually sat at home doing this, I'd have to go do the washing up or something, because it's not for me. But like you say, if you're a bit more ad hoc, people that need to have a conversation. That might be the core of the meeting. But if you need Dave and he's green, you bring him in for 10 minutes. You say, thanks, Dave. That's great. You can go off now.
Or there are those meetings where you need to listen and know the gist of what is going on in the business in regards to that. But we can now crack on while we're listening and do some certain tasks that you can multitask like that, and Teams and electronic gives us more of the ability to do that than it might look more rude in person. But from a teacher point of view, it's great that we're all going to have these laptops too, because we can catch students out. So once little Jimmy says, so and so teacher said that I was allowed to do that, then you can see that they're green and you've got a laptop and all of people walking around, and you can just give them a chat or a quick call and call them in, and they'll soon stop trying that on once they realise that it's that quick and easy for us to ask each other.
The other thing I like is, obviously, with the student work folders that we make inside each class team, every student gets their own secure folder that only they and the teachers can see. Well, what's great about that is that as the students are doing work in there and kind of working on things, or they're supposed to be working on things, the teacher at any time can just kind of come over and virtually look over their shoulder and have a look in there. So say, hey, Jimmy, how's that project going? Have you started it? It's all good now. It's in my OneDrive, or is it? You go, well, okay, but I had a look, and there is a document there, but to be honest, there's not much in it. there's about, I think you've written the title and you've not underlined that. So, you know, there's a lot to do still.
I love that. Yeah.
That's a cynical view, but let's turn it round and let's call it kind of interactive teaching. You might have a look, and Jimmy's done a lovely job. He's got, there's several pages in there. There's a title and he's underlined it, but he's just answered the wrong question, and you can see that he's gone off at a tangent, and he's going to get it wrong, and he's going to spend another 9 pages giving you the wrong answer. It's not even wrong, it's just not the question that you asked. So you could go back in and have a word with him and say, actually, I notice you're heading off in this direction. Or even worse, you might look and find that the whole class is going off in that direction. At which point you might just say, I tell you what, we'll change the question, guys, because you've all answered this one.
I mean, 100%, the live file element of it all is how I do my coursework. But from a OneNote point of view, there's one student in particular who is only with us 1 day a week because they're an academy footballer for a Premiership club. And it means that we're often having those quick chats and an audio note on Teams where they ask me a question and I can quickly send it back and explain it so much quicker, or I can really quickly add comments to their OneNote notes that I can see, when they're managing to squeeze that in on a bus away to Aston Villa or something that it might be. It's so powerful and efficient for me and staff. You can close your laptop, collect the kids from school, and if it works for you to reopen your laptop and mark that way, or in the evenings, then you can do it that way, but also more powerful. And I feel like videos and the use of videos within OneNote and Firefly enables you to support students and extend. So often students, you teach one subject and the same sort of questions that come up or the same issues they have with writing an essay that comes up. So if you do a fantastic video that explains how they should approach essays, you can keep directing students back to it. We can also check did they actually look back at it. So there are those good students that just want to hear you explain it again and your voice explain it. And the video does that without you having to re-put the labour in.
It's an amazing thing. So I remember when Teams and assignments first came out, one of the most popular requested things was, can I record myself giving the answer? Because otherwise I have to open the Word document, and you can do that. There's a review mode. You can kind of put some nice red ink on it, and the student knows that's your comment, and that is good. But what's much, much nicer, and I think Microsoft have played a blinder doing this, to be honest, you can simply just record yourself talking, and then that whole kind of little video gets attached as a comment to that piece of work. So students who may struggle reading teacher notes, especially if your handwriting's bad like mine, but the fact that you now as a teacher can be just sat there on the sofa and you just record that, it makes you got a nice background behind you, and just record your answer to the students. That's so powerful. And actually it's almost hands-free.
But I agree. I've done it on my phone quite powerfully, but it's not just powerful, it's powerful for all students. So there's a perception that it's really powerful for SEN students, students with educational needs, but I've found it's the most powerful for all students, because when we read something, we'll read an essay, we'll make notes down the side, then we'll make notes down the bottom, and even if with the best will in the world, we'll tend to write it more formally. And so who's that benefiting anyway?
Yeah.
But even if you write it quite casually, there's something about the written word that they still go, so what did you mean by this? Whereas if you explain it to them verbally, and they're like, why didn't you just say that? But if
I did write that, but it's the emphasis, right? Unless you're going to put words in italics and underline them, and well, I mean, this is why YouTube and Vimeo and all the rest of it, and TikTok, that's why they're so popular. I mean, TikTok's great because in 7 seconds you can get across. But sometimes it's a bit wasteful, shall we say, of people's time. But for example, there's a lot of stuff that Microsoft do where they just do little bits in Excel, and you get 7 seconds of how to do something in Excel. We do the same now. We're starting to make little TikTok style videos of little bits that you can do in our product. It's so easy to digest. Why would we do writing? And that's from the point of view of somebody who loves writing. I love text. I love books and reading and writing of all kinds. But sometimes a video is just more digestible.
Yeah, I'm not, despite doing a law degree, I'm not Mr. Fantastic Writer or element, but do think the power of audio and video is so strong. And there was a particular person I was listening to in an audio book or podcast that said that our perception of intelligent and how far we can go with our intelligence we can go much further when now we've got video and audio, because lots of intelligent people couldn't concentrate when it comes to the written text and take that message in, but they were really bright. But now that we have audio books and we have video, etc., we'll be amazed at how far we can all come on, let alone some other people will go even further with that. And it could make for real gains as adult learners as well as teenage learners. But I particularly feel like teenagers really benefit from hearing your voice as a teacher say it. You can sometimes send them to a YouTube video of a teacher that is either arguably or actually a better teacher than you in your subject, and it explains it to them, but there's something they like hearing you explain it in your voice and the way that you did before that's quite comforting and makes educational gains.
So it's kind of it's that extension of the classroom thing, and that extension of the personal relationship that a teacher has with the students. They trust you. They see you a couple of times a week. You're the French guy. You're the English guy, the business lady, and they know you and they trust you and they feel comfortable from a pastoral point of view. And so when you give them a response that's verbal and facial as well, with recording, they feel comfortable taking on that learning. Whereas I know that some people, if you give them a piece of text to read, even if it's a beautifully written piece of text with good handwriting, written by somebody that really likes that person, there's still a barrier. And there's a time for reading and writing, and there's a time for communicating, and it's not always the same thing.
Well, that's where we have to recognise that people are different. And I'm not necessarily talking about kinesthetic and different types of learning, but staff, I would love it if all staff used OneNote for everything and did things the way that I do them, because that's how I learn. But obviously the older you get, the more you realise people work in different ways, and that works for different people. So the fact that we're moving in a technological direction doesn't mean we're doing it in a prescriptive way. We're going to do lots of training for staff to try and show benefits, but certain departments, either because of the nature of their subject or otherwise, will still be giving more written elements in the way that we discussed them. And then that means that kids are quite well served. They don't have to be digital in every subject for the sake of it. They'll develop those skills, hopefully see how they can be transferable for different subjects, but they'll have a range of different approaches.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's brilliant. It's a good plan. So I think that's all going to hang together, isn't it? So you're already making fantastic strides because you've moved to the cloud effectively. That's step one, and that is a big step. So that's gone really well. You've now got these plans for the per student devices. You've got staff who already have their devices. That's going to move forward really, really nicely. It's going to open up all those other benefits for teaching and learning. As you say, using class notebooks for note taking, and if you're pushing assignments out for teachers to respond to students' work with the videos and all that kind of stuff. And that idea as well of students accessing resources independently, because I know sometimes you'll set an assignment and you'll point the students to a particular Word document or spreadsheet or PowerPoint or video or whatever. But are there times when your students work kind of more or autonomously, where they would it's my favorite kind of differentiation. It's guided choice, where you say to the students, you've got a choice. You need to learn this topic, but you can do that by choosing the document that you want, or you can go up to the internet and find something. You can go find something on Firefly as well. You've got these resources in the SharePoint and the Teams. Do you give students the opportunity to do that kind of independent decision making about their learning?
We do. I mean, lots of staff are better at giving them more of that freedom. My approach is a bit more the core stuff that I need them all to get done is a bit more right this way. But I think particularly the extension tasks to stretch people, particularly tech can help, but also leaving it more open-ended so that they can really use different approaches is good. But there are some assignments that can be choice. You know, there are some that's like write an essay or do a presentation. And actually, if you say to them, you can do the presentation, but you can do it using some form of tech whereby the presentation is delivered, by a robotic voice where you've typed in the script, because sometimes that barrier is that they don't like hearing their own voice or their own face for different reasons. Then they often will pick the one that will increase their digital skills rather than maybe just the written text. But teenagers obviously are quite mindful of some of those things. So giving them a few choices of how to do it, they think is just a way of them not having to speak in front of their peers, but actually it's improving other digital skills and getting used to
sneaking that in. Yeah, I like it. I think that's a perfect approach, because back in the day when I was taught to teach, you put your lesson plans together, you had to say, right, some students or all students will achieve this, and some students will do this. So that was your core learning. Everybody has to do that. And I think I'm probably with you on that. I think when it comes to how most people do the core learning, I think that probably needs to be fairly prescriptive. This is the document that you need to read because this is the one that's got the answers, basically. But when it comes to then doing the next step stuff, so extension activities on top of that, or side activities, perhaps that's the point to kind of open it up and say, right, you've got the core stuff. Now that you can play the scales on the piano, now it's up to you to learn how to play something interesting. And we don't care if you play jazz or modern rock or whatever, as long as you're playing something nice and is vaguely related to this period. So that maybe that's it. Maybe it's like a funnel shaped. It starts off fairly narrow, and then it opens up.
Particularly, the younger students where they're doing end of year exams that are set by us, we maybe have got the freedom throughout the curriculum, because it's not a matter of but the coursework needs to be in a particular way, because that's more us getting them ready for the future, and we can let them a bit more loose, a bit more rope on that one. But I agree I teach the older ones, so it tends to be a similar approach to how you're describing. Yeah.
But that's really interesting, because it makes it more dynamic, and it means that over the period that those students are with you, and they start quite young with you as well, don't they? So we
actually have three. And actually we've got a nursery and from newborns that's just opening. So it's from nursery to university, as we call it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that period, there'll be times where those students have a lot of discovery and exploration and choice. In my son's school, they call it golden time. You've done your work, so you can do some golden time, which means you can't do anything you want, really, which is lovely. And then you'll have another moment where it's like, oh, hang on, we've got some exams you need to do now, so you better tighten up a little bit again for that. And then you go and you loosen up again, and then you tighten up for the GCSEs, and then you loosen up a bit, and you tighten up for the A levels. So it's like what you call it, I can't remember the name of the tool. You tighten and loosen stuff. Anyway, it's spanner, ratchet, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You tighten and loosen depending on where they are in their school career at that point.
Well, and that's required talking to people. We want digital to be a normal part of daily life, but not fake in any way. And we want it to be appropriate. So we said year 10 and up is where we focus more on productivity, office-based, as well as OneNote, etc. Whereas lower down in the senior school, we don't. And also at the prep school, I did visit a local prep school that genuinely do fantastic things in terms of using iPads on a daily basis. And we want to do that because, one, it opens them up to tablets, and that's maybe a bit more age appropriate for creativity at a young age. But we didn't necessarily want to go down the usage to the extent that they do, because we still really value that kind of balance between devices and non-devices at the prep school age. And I do work with our prep school, who have got a few colleagues of mine, such as Kim and Helen, who kind of make sure that that they've got tech as well that's appropriate for their age groups. Because being someone that teaches the older ones, it's difficult for me to know the needs. I'm doing as many visits as possible, but it's definitely different needs, and if you say tightening different approaches and different intensities at different times for different ages.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Stefan, thank you so much for your time. And I feel we've more than covered the topic, and very nicely around the topic as well. Thank you for your wonderful thoughts on teaching and learning and how this all fits together. So will you come back and tell us how it goes after the rollout and after it's been in place for a bit?
Yeah, 100%. And you know, you guys have helped us a lot to even get to this point. So I'll be thankful for those that help throughout this rollout as well. So yeah, it's a big process. It's a teamwork with you guys and a few others as well.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you.